Are you ready? Hey, everybody.
Hey, Pop.
Hello, everybody.
People in the back.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome to the Inner Loop.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome to the Inner Loop.
Without further ado.
Okay, so without further ado, we're going to get started.
We should get started. We're
rambling.
I'm rambling.
We're going to get started. Welcome to the Inner Loop Radio. I'm Rachel Kuntz.
And I'm Courtney Sexton.
Thank you for joining us.
If you haven't already, remember to subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, and check out our website at theinnerlooplit.org.
For any new listeners here on the Inner Loop Radio, we delve into all things creative writing, whether that be inspiration or craft, publishing or editing, how to make a living, or just how we all sit down each day in front of an empty page.
Or screen. Sometimes we play clips of local writers reading their work at our monthly reading series. Other times we invite those writers, as well as other members of our literary community, to join our discussion.
On today's show, let's dig into what it means to be good.
Is this like a philosophical question? Like, are we talking like morally good?
Yes.
Wow.
I'm just kidding.
Okay. Because you did bring up like Socrates last time, so, you know.
I know. Actually, I studied the great books of Western civilization, and all those old white philosophers talk a lot about goodness. There's a lot of disagreement. What's good? It's not good.
They didn't ask any women, so.
It's true. So the same is true for publishing. What does it mean to be good? So how do you know when something is good?
You know, it's really funny that this is the theme of our episode this week, because I was having this conversation with a friend who is not a writer just the other day. And we were sitting out on their porch and, you know, having a little drink before dinner, and I was helping them pack. And my friend said to me, actually, a poet friend did walk by, and that poet friend's work, you know, came up, and a friend said to me, but how do you know? Like, what, you know, when you're like reading a poem, like, what are the things you look for? What stands out to you? And we got into this kind of philosophical thing where, you know, you can start at the base and say, well, there's form, right? You can know when someone has studied and knows how to craft something. There are kind of essential elements and pieces of things that you learn to identify. And by study, I don't mean it has to be a formal study, but I mean, if you read enough, you kind of start to get the gist of, you know, what works and what doesn't, and you can emulate that. Mm-hmm. But then we also talked about that other something, right? That idea of poemness, for example, like stands out to me, and that kind of intangibility, and that's almost what you look for. Like, is it that thing that you can't put your finger on that just keeps pulling you in? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think about that. When I'm critiquing work, because I consider myself a better critic than writer often. I'm like, I have good taste. I can't always do it, but I have good taste. Yeah, I think there are definitely like a couple of different things you look for to define goodness again. And it's that, like, what is the intention? Is that intention conveyed? Is there something that surprises you as a reader? Is there something that stays with you as a reader? What are those lingering bits? I don't know. I'm just rambling.
You're like, I could go on and on. So I want to bring in our guest. So I'm going to throw it a break, and then we're going to come back and bring Liz in and talk more about these considerations, if you will. Yeah. So for more on this, we invited our Author's Corner Spotlight to join us on the show, and we're going to tell you all about that in just a minute. Welcome back to the Inner Loop Radio. we've been discussing what it means to be a good writer. And now we'd like to welcome our spotlight author from our brand new program called Author's Corner.
So every month, we're really excited. The Inner Loop is spotlighting a local author who's published with a small to medium-sized press or self-published, and who doesn't have the resources for their own publicity team.
So we treat a small publication as a New York Times bestseller, and we connect talented local authors to readers in the community. Our June Author's Corner Spotlight is Elizabeth Deanna Morris Lakes, whose name is a line of iambic pentameter, and whose book Ashley, Sugarnotch and The Wolf is out from Mason Jar Press. She joins us on the show. Welcome.
Hi, surprise! I've been here the whole time.
So yeah, let's bring you in on this conversation. What is, you wrote your Washington Independent Review of Books article on this subject. So why don't you tell us your thoughts, and then we'll jump in and hash this out.
Impart your wisdom on us,
We're going to get the answers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing you have to do is stop wondering if it's good. Because so often I feel like we really just expect things to be good or bad initially. And that can be, I think it's exhausting, and I don't think it's super productive. And I think also it sort of puts this pressure on you to be productive, which is very much a product of capitalism. And writing is sort of, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of the time antithetical to that. And so, yeah, when do you know it's good? Way further down the line, that's when you should be asking yourself that question. First, I think it's okay to just let your writing exist, let it sit on the page, play with it. And from there, once you've been working with it for a while and you have a sense of scope and you have a sense of the purpose or the thesis of what you're doing, even if that thesis is just beauty, right? Then I think you can be okay, is this good? But from there, you will already be pretty intimately familiar with the work. And also, hypothetically, you may have shown it to other people. You will have gotten feedback. Hopefully, those are people you trust and not terrible people. And from there, you'll be able to say, I think, this is good. But good also is it fulfilling the need that I want it to?
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking while you were talking. The question changes. Yeah. It's not, is this good? Once you know what you're trying to do, you can ask yourself, is this serving the purpose that I'm trying to achieve?
Does this achieve? Yeah, exactly.
Each part. Is this serving the overall, good in the philosophical sense of the piece? And then when everything that's in a piece is intentional, then it has to be good. In the
right.
Really good.
Well, so this I think it's really messy, right? Because then are we also talking good from our perspective as the writer, or good from a reader's perspective? And are those things always the same?
No.
Right.
But that's fine.
Yeah.
I am a person that I feel like Twitter specifically loves to say how much people on Twitter love to say how much they hate their own writing. And I love my own writing.
Yeah.
Even though
can't relate to that.
I mean, maybe this is why I'm less emotionally distraught over thinking about if my writing is good or not. Because usually when I write something, even if I know I need to revise it, I'm like, oh, cool. I did that.
There's something about it that still feels right.
Yes.
Or good.
Yes. But it's also very much okay, I wrote down the words that I meant to say just now. And then later, if I look at them and I'm like, oh, I'm realizing now that even though I did the thing I wanted to do, maybe I could do that in a way that would be more clear to other people.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just you just got to go into it with love.
So there are iterations of good.
Yeah. Well, and also
this is getting so meta with the amount of times that we've said good in 50 different contexts.
I know.
It's very apropos.
I know for a fact that I'm skipping ahead here, but it's very appropriate, so I'm going to bring it up. Which is that I know you had said to me earlier that we were going to talk about drafts. And I think that this is a perfect example of this. And because
the shitty first draft.
Yes, exactly. But the question you had specifically said to me in this email, this is some behind the curtain shit right now, was,
what are you talking about? We've never met you before.
Never before. I walked into this house, I was blindfolded.
That's right.
What is that, the question was, what are the most drafts you've written of a piece? And this is my answer to this, which I know you're not expecting, so get ready. When I was 17,
You're like 0.
yes, everything I write and then I put it.
Let it go.
It's gold. She just comes out her fingers.
So when I was 17, I was writing spoken word poetry.
Cool.
And I wrote a spoken word poem called Affection Addiction. I had just broken up with my boyfriend, who was very annoying, bless him. He just got engaged, which I feel very,
or then?
Oh, no, like just now, like
Got
a
it,
few
okay.
weeks ago. I was
Presently.
like, good for you, man. Because he was a fine dude. He was very sweet. He just was like so annoying at the end. And I broke up with him and I immediately was like, oh, no, I don't have anyone to make out with. And this sucks. I like had always just like my whole life had wanted people to touch. And even now, like my 4.5-year-old weeps because there's not a real person that can sleep in bed with him. So like, that was me, except, many years ago. And so I was very upset. So I wrote the spoken word poem called Affection Addiction, where I was trying to grapple with the fact that like I was at sea. And it had lines like, I'm addicted to birds singing and you draped over me as a robe. That had never happened. Has now, but
well, also 17.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I wrote this poem. I performed it a lot. I performed it at a spoken word competition that was at a brewery in Harrisburg, where I'm from, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I got 10th place. I was the youngest person there by like 6 years or something. And then, that ended. But that was the first draft of something else.
I see.
So then I get to college, and I'm a creative writing major, and we have to write essays, and I am thinking a lot about my relationship with touch. And I wrote an essay, but I wrote about, this line between like, when you want to be touched so badly, you let yourself get touched in a way that's not good. Mm-hmm. So then I wrote my book. I was working on my book, and I have a line in Ashley Sugarnotch and The River where she is lying on the shore of an island in the middle of the Susquehanna, and she says, then the flies come, the large peony ants, and crawl over my neck, routing their way from the line behind my ear to the muscles that blur the definition between neck and shoulder. And then she says, my sweat sinks into the moss, and I am grateful for this respite of affection, these hair-thin fingers that crawl over my body. And when I took that poem to workshop, everyone was like, who wants bugs to crawl on them? And I was like, yeah, that's weird. Who wants that? As I'm like going outside, on my breaks and like lying in the grass and hoping the ants show up.
Of feeling.
It feels so nice. If they don't bite you, which they do bite Ashley. Sorry, sweetie. Okay, so now that was like the next draft of this, right? Mm-hmm. And then but right before I was pregnant after giving birth, I wrote an essay called Touch Me. And that was the final draft. So that ended up getting published by The Rumpus. So you can read it.
Awesome.
And
note to listeners.
Yes. Touch Me, Elizabeth Deanna Morris Lakes will just bring up the essay on The Rumpus. Because
Are you sure that's what it'll bring up?
Let me tell you, I am the only Elizabeth Deanna Morris Lakes. Something that was intentional.
Great.
So that is what I mean when I say, like, we really have to, like, divorce ourselves from what is thinking about things being good. Because Affection Addiction was good. Mm-hmm. It was good because I was good at performing it. It was well written, and other people said it was good, right? I won this competition. But it was the first draft of something that I was trying to work through. I guess it was basically 10 years between. Yeah. Maybe even 11 years between when I wrote that and when Touch Me got published. So which I feel like must be overwhelming.
It's your leaves of grass.
Yes, basically. Except I'm not just going to keep adding to the same book and be like...
Same thing.
Is that what we all do every day?
So yeah, I think, you have time. Just keep working on it. And maybe something that you didn't think was a draft is actually a draft. I actually even left
that
out one of
happens
the
to me all the
drafts.
time. Yeah.
I get too excited about first drafts sometimes. Like, I'm like, yes, it's here, it's good. And then I go back and I'm like,
yeah.
But now
I
need
feel
to
like
work
I
on
write
this.
things and then throw them away, and then when I come upon them later, I'm like, oh yeah. Or I'll be like writing a story, and I'll be like, I wrote that thing that one time. Where can I find it? Where can I find it? This is gonna fit perfectly right here.
Yes.
Yeah, but that, like, you know, I don't know. That makes me think about. I was listening to Bob Iger on the way here, who was the CEO of Disney when they like acquired 20th Century Fox and Marvel and Pixar. Anyway, he's clearly like the best at his thing, what he does. The thing that he does, which is so different than the things that I do. However, I still related to a lot of the things he was saying, which is so interesting about humans. Like, you know, as writers, we're interested in everything. And here's why, because you can turn anything into your own story. But he was saying how he had invested in this cop musical television show called, what was it called? Cop Rock or something?
Missed that one. Didn't come up in my queue.
Right. Well, here's why. It was a total horrible failure.
Yeah.
And here's there was this man who was sitting there talking about how he was trust his instincts about, you know, Pixar content and how good it is. How he trusted his instincts about Marvel content and how good it was. And then he was telling this story about how his instincts were telling him that this cop musical was it, man, because nobody else was doing it. And he was like, this is good. Like he was saying like his instincts were saying like, this is good. And it fucking flopped. It was terrible. And it didn't go anywhere. And then the next thing that he did succeed. And it was like NYPD Blue. And that one he was right about. Yeah. And so like, you know, he was saying like, I don't regret, you know, investing in Cop Rock, because you have to take risks in order to succeed. And in order to be like at the front of your field, you have to be willing to fail.
Absolutely.
And that applies so much to us. You know, how can you be like, how can you be a creator if you're just copying what everybody else is doing?
Oh, we fail every day. I mean, I think that's part of a great part of the process, right? Because it builds resilience for one.
Not just that, it's like what creates like avant-garde. Like experimenting is where the juice is.
Yeah.
Juice it out.
But again, I think it comes back to like, which part of something are you failing at, right? Like there's just layers that I think if we're trying to get back to this question of what is good, it's just like there's no one answer.
And the one thing I will say too is as long as you're writing honest to goodness, like kind things, because I think the one thing is that there are plenty of people who have written things that are like harmful because they're like racist or they're sexist or they, you know, there's somebody
if we're talking content wise.
Yeah, but even so, like if that exists then and then it ends up being something, let's say, God forbid, it gets very popular and it ends up influencing people and then harming people because of that. So I think that there is like, I feel like there's that's the one caveat is that like, yes, I think that you should just fail, but just make sure that you think about
fail rightly.
Yeah, that you're doing it in a way that does not harm anyone.
So switching gears a little bit, you talk about how you feel poetry is play. So I was curious about your, you know, how you sit down and write a poem. How does that work? How do you incorporate play in the creation process?
Yeah, so I think one of the first things that I do is I really like working with constraints. So
me too.
We talk about we talk about that a lot.
It's fun, and you know, thanks to Ulipo for that, right? That's where I learned that like term specifically. Yeah. But I think that some forms for me are like it's too overwhelming to have like a whole form. So like, you know, my name's an iambic pentameter. Now I never have to write anything in iambic pentameter ever again. I've checked the box. You know, I've proved myself, and that's like too hard for me. But okay, what about looking at something with some sort of pattern that matches a sonnet? Or what about syllabics, right? Where now you're forcing yourself to reconsider language. And so that I think is a really great way to do things. But that said, I usually don't do the first draft with a constraint like that. Usually when I'm writing, that might not be totally true. If I'm working from like bare bones nothing, I don't normally start that way. With Ashley Sugarnotch and The Wolf, once I sort of knew what my system was, I then was writing to the system, which is fine. But what I will do is I will write in a notebook, and I have terrible handwriting, like just atrocious. Like the only grade I got like a less than a B in school ever was in handwriting. Thanks for nothing, Mrs. Gilbert. I am assuming she is dead. But yeah, so I write it out, and it usually ends up being in paragraph form because my handwriting is so big and messy that like in any notebook, I'm not actually going to be able to get line breaks. Or if I do get line breaks, they're all just like, I type it up and it's like an inch on the page. It's like very skinny lines. And so I usually do that. And then another really important part to my writing process, which helps with the play, is I will completely retype poems. So do you know about the studies that they've done on this?
No, tell us.
Vaguely, I think.
Get ready, baby. So basically, they've done some studies on students writing composition papers. And before word processing, by that I literally mean a word processor, before that moment, students had to completely retype papers when they were revising them. And so just the act of retyping automatically like smooths out and fixes the way that they're writing. As opposed to when you have word processing, you can go in and you can make edits immediately without having to use whiteout, but you aren't like doing those sort of more material changes. And so they basically did a study where they had students write papers one way and write papers the other way. And they found that the students made way more edits with word processing, but they weren't material and they weren't good. And so, or, it was a typo, fine, who cares? Right. But with retyping it, it just smoothed everything out. But it was also like natural. Like the students did like very little work to get to that point. And so once I go from the notebook to the computer, the act of retyping ends up being the first sort of active play, because now's the first time that I'm actually seeing like, how am I arranging this on the page? How am I using white space? What are my line breaks actually looking like? And then from there, I try to, unless it's like, sometimes I will still do the sort of line edits depending on how far I am, but if I'm doing a full draft, I completely retype it. And that allows me to play around if I pick a new constraint. It also, this is the other thing, I feel like people don't talk about this. Having drafts does not need to be linear.
No.
But nobody ever does that.
Oh, I'm a collage artist. I literally like cut pieces from drafts and like paste them, like have them spread out on the floor and piece them together.
What I mean is taking like a draft and writing two drafts from the same draft.
Sure.
And I think that also allows you play because I feel like especially for younger writers, they're like, well, I can't, like, they don't want to abandon anything.
And a single idea,
and
right?
a single idea. Yeah. And so by allowing themselves to branch into like draft 2A, 2B, 2C, I think that gives you more room for play, because then if you do something and it totally fails, then you still have this sort of like second draft that's like slightly different, or that's you have this base draft that you're working off of. And if you do 3 drafts, you can do exactly what you said and collage them together in a way that's better.
I think also listening to you talk about the idea of retyping in a sense is has a similar effect, I think, to reading out loud, right? Because as you're retyping, you're hearing it again over and over and hearing it differently and seeing it, but the other
thing I've been doing lately is recording myself, reading it aloud, and then listening back, which is an interesting
I used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
I haven't done it recently.
I know. I feel like
all the time when I was younger.
I feel like I've recommended that to people, and then I've never actually done it.
Away from it.
No, I never actually did it, and then I started doing it recently, and I'm like, oh yeah, like especially for pieces that I'm stuck on, and I'm like, I know this can be better, but I can't exactly. Something about this isn't quite right. Like it just gives you a new way of processing it. But yeah, you play a lot in this book and what I've read from it. So why don't we hear a couple poems so that we can put this conversation in context?
I like that.
I'll start with the first Ashley poem because that's a good one, and that's where it all began. Ashley Sugarnotch and the Big Red Bow. I just hate how thin and toned my legs are. My arm and leg hairs are so light I barely even have to shave. Can't my body be a little lopsided? One leg shorter than the other? I saw a young girl at the mall with these shoes, one wedge and the other flat. It compensated. I want to need to compensate. An old friend was born with 2 thumbs on one hand. Her parents cut one off, a shame for sure. But with the one she had left, L-shaped, she could smash anyone in thumb wrestling. She called it the sledgehammer. My fingers? Even in winter, the cuticles don't tear. Even chewing them. Maybe I wouldn't mind looking so lovely and framed if I had something like a heart surgery scar, or like heart surgery and a scar I could show off with strapless dresses. We weren't rich growing up. We were comfortable. If I had needed the surgery or those shoes, we could have afforded it. This isn't so ridiculous what I'm asking. My mother and father smoked cigars occasionally, had a glass of wine with friends, but these points of decay don't interest me. I'm not interested in some death film only visible when my body is pieced apart during autopsy. Even my ears are the same shape. Maybe something will just happen, you know? Some sort of accident or mishap. My father lost a chunk of ear during a war or something similar. He would always touch toward the blank space at the dinner table to remind us of something we couldn't know. But this was before. I'm trying to know the things I can't. For Halloween, I wore my green swimsuit bottoms and a big red bow tied around my chest, a new car and a new car model. Everyone asked what I was. When I told them a present to be presented, they tugged at the bow and looked past my eyes.
Oof. Liz, I love how a lot of the poems in this book take on a narrative form, and they have a very clear speaker, right? You know, that's something that is definitely different in different poems, whatever. Can you read one that has a little more identifiable form to it to just contrast?
A wolf one.
Yeah. Time to read a wolf poem.
Yeah.
So you got it.
That's what I was getting at.
Can we have a wolf?
So I'm going to read the Sestina.
The wolf attempts to explain himself.
I just want this all to stop now, to go away, Ashley. The feeling that saturates my skin at night, like my skeleton is pulling away from my flesh. Just like it's new and implanted, but rejecting my body, an infection. I want to be whole and composed, to last through the night without shoving my hand in the hot water or numbing my face with ice. The water running down my neck. How do I stop this, Ashley? My hands are full of static I can't squeeze out. The last thing I want is to find you in my dreams tonight and crack open your ribs and rid your body of its organs. Is it so unreasonable to want a justice for myself? A new ending where I justify I'm not a wolf inevitable. Finding you in the water of the river and holding you down, your body putting up a fight, because that's human, Ashley.
It's human to fight against what we want at night when the exhaustion wears through the last set of reserve and control. I wonder when my last guard will shatter and I'll become just less than human. The other, unrecognizable and willing to be held in straits beneath the water until I can no longer breathe. It's so easy, Ashley, for them to see you as less than a body and certainly not a soul.
They won't see my body full of electricity and my hands and fists trying to last against the jerking muscles and teeth bitten on my tongue. Ashley, you know, I never want to hurt you in the dreams. I just lose myself when covered in fur. I'd rather bathe you in water cool and blessed. I'd rather find you like a lover in the night and curl at your feet. A good dog. And in this tender night, we'd know, though our dreams might be bad, our bodies would be still. I'd wash you clean with river water in the morning, and our restfulness would last through the day. But if I get too close, I might just forget these hands are mine, Ashley. Ashley, will either of us make it through the night just long enough to see the sun's body rise one last time over the river's sparkling water? The answer is no, by the way. She does die at the end.
Just spoiler alert. God. Wow. So I have such a hard time. Well, first I was like distracted trying to like follow the to follow the form, which
the six words are Ashley, night, just, body,
right.
Last, and water. And just I play with, just becomes justify.
Yes, you can, and I love that kind of play. But so I'm a a canid researcher and conservationist. And I always, one of the big things that we have such a hard time with in that realm is convincing people that wolves don't prey on people.
Well, but this isn't a wolf. This is the mythic wolf. This is the big bad wolf.
Right. But that's the problem, because it is a pervasive myth and people think it's real. But nonetheless, beautiful piece.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love how visceral all the language is. It makes you uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
In a good way.
In it, like you do empathize with what you know in your mind is supposed to be the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
Going back to that good versus bad.
Hey. It's all connected.
Yeah, and this poem specifically, I think kind of fucks with people, because I'm not trying to say
that the wolf is suddenly good and we should forgive him.
Right.
But I think that something I think about a lot is I wrote this book before like Me Too became like the thing that it is. But something I think about a lot is that
we're having to be, and I'm not saying that this is this is not a criticism, very reactionary. Mm-hmm. And sometimes reactionary, years after things happen. And something that I'm very curious about is, how do we stop the cycle before it happens? Mm-hmm. And so here, I wrote this poem in part because, Ashley can't get out, but neither can the wolf. Mm-hmm. The system is built to support the wolf. And so it's very easy for the wolf to stay in the system, even if he's trying to fight out. Just like the system is built to hurt Ashley. Mm-hmm. And so it's very hard for Ashley not to get hurt, even though she's trying to get out.
Mm. Mm. On that note, it's deep. No, I love that. It's so topical, and it just feels very...
talking about just, systems in general, this and others, kind of where and how do we break them down? When should we break them down? What is working? What isn't? Yeah.
And how do you break the cycle?
And how do you insert yourself into that place, too?
Well, this has been such a great discussion. You can buy Liz's book, Ashley, Sugarnotch and The Wolf, online or in person at Potter's House local bookseller.
That's right. And you can find out more about Liz and our Author's Corner program on our website at theinnerlooplit.org/Author's Corner.
Keep a lookout for Liz's article forthcoming in the Washington Independent Review of Books.
And throughout the month of June, if you order takeout from our industry partners with Eat, Drink, Read, Potter's House Pie Shop, Shaw's Tavern, and Revelers Hour, all in DC, you'll see Liz and her book featured in that campaign.
Liz, thank you so much for letting us pick your brain. Will you stick around for some trivia?
Yes.
All right.
Up next, we're going to play a little game, because Rachel loves games, called Up next, we play a little game called Antemortem or Postmortem. Stay tuned. Let's gather. Gather, please. If you can gather in.
Gather round for the second half. And we're going to get started.
We'll get started.
We're officially getting started. Not teasing you this time. Welcome back to the Inner Loop Radio. We turn now to some trivia. I'm calling this Antemortem or Postmortem. I'm going to give you an author, Liz and Courtney, and you have to tell me if they got famous before or after they died.
Oh, good.
This is a fun one.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
I did a lot of research, which was really fun. Okay, let's see. George Eliott.
Are we alternating here? Are we
you
keeping
can both
score?
Guess. You can collaborate on your answer.
Style.
This is a collaboration effort.
Okay.
What do you know about George Eliott?
Nothing.
How many L's or T's?
Oh, one of each.
But anyway, stay on point, you two. This is a short game.
I'm going to say before.
Before she died.
Sure.
Before?
Yeah.
That's accurate.
Yay!
She published many novels throughout her career, the last of which was Middlemarch, and which was published when she was 52.
Hey.
And she was pretty successful.
Good.
Which led to public scrutiny of her private life and caused a lot of drama. but still.
Yes.
She's recognized. Okay. How about Sylvia Plath?
Oh, I have so many feelings about this.
Oh,
Does it count as...
Yeah.
But I feel like we know her mostly because of
After.
after. So I feel like this is a trick question.
Yeah,
This is a trick question. I counted her as after she died because she killed herself 1 month after writing The Bell Jar, and she won the Pulitzer Prize 19 years after her death.
All right. Yeah.
Sylvia.
I'll call that one after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Zora Neale Hurston.
Oh, before. Yeah.
No.
No.
Sorry, Zora.
She died broke, buried in an unmarked grave, and her writing wasn't revived until 40 years after their eyes were watching God. Was
No idea. Wow.
God. Okay. Well, now I just
we
feel
are.
bad.
Yeah, right? Toni Morrison.
Oh, before.
You guys, yep.
She also just died.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. She won the Pulitzer for Beloved at 58 and the Nobel
Yeah.
Prize for Literature at 63.
That's pretty baller.
It is
also.
baller. Okay, late life writers,
Yeah.
okay?
I wouldn't. No, I think it's baller because I wouldn't call that late life. Like,
No, I mean like later in life. Like I feel like
Do you know what I mean?
publishing is obsessed with like the debut authors
Yeah,
these days,
yeah, for
especially the
sure.
last 5 years. It's like he's
Agreed.
young, he's brilliant, and his first book was like off the charts. And it's like,
I
well,
love how you
most
say he also.
writers, only because I'm thinking of a specific writer,
I know.
which will remain unnamed. Most writers just like toil away their most of their lives getting better and better and better in obscurity, and then they get famous. But anyway, on a rant for another time. Okay, John Keats.
Oh, Keats was after because he died when he was 25.
I knew you would know this one. Yeah.
And he, whenever I was reading him, I was like, God, these poems are so boring. And my professor, Jen Atkinson, was like, Liz, they're not.
Jen.
Oh yeah, Jen's the best. She was like, they're not boring. He was the first one to do this.
Right. You always have to put things in context, right?
Like you gotta. She's like, you gotta calm down. And I was like, aw.
Fine.
Fair.
Apparently, a friend of his claimed that cruel reviews of his poetry expedited his death.
I do vaguely remember that, like as a rumor. Yes.
So emo.
Okay, let's see. I think we have time for one more guess. Yes. Okay. And then I'm going to just tell you a bunch of information real fast. Okay. Wallace Stevens.
Before.
Yes. But he didn't win the Pulitzer until a few months before his death.
Oh, I'm glad
Okay.
he was alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is great. Like,
And he worked most of his life as a lawyer and then a vice president for an
remember
insurance
that.
company.
Yeah.
Okay, and then speed round. Mark Twain didn't write his first book till he was 41.
Mark the Twain.
Franz Kafka was an insurance salesman for most of his life, and
That tracks.
he didn't get famous until decades after his death. Herman Melville failed to achieve his success with his sophomore novel Moby Dick, which only got famous 20 years after his death. So that whole sophomore novel, stress, like when the freshman novel is so great and then the sophomore one, that's real. Okay. H.P. Lovecraft, Emily Dickinson, Edgar Allan Poe is an obvious one, all after they died.
Wow.
That's it. Yeah.
well, I'm
I guess
famous
there's
and I'm
hope for
alive,
us
so
then. Yeah.
There you go. You're famous because you're on this podcast, for one.
so-
yeah, clearly.
Well, thanks for playing my little game with us.
Thanks for a game.
That's our show. Join us every other Monday.
Our podcast rocks, but did you know that the Inner Loop has lots of other programming for writers in the DC area?
I write all the dorkiest lines for Courtney. We have readings, retreats, workshops, a summer residency, and more.
And you can read all about it at, one more time, I'll tell you our website, theinnerlooplit.org, where you can also donate to support this podcast and local literature and writers. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at theinnerlooplit.
Today's episode was produced by me, Rachel Kuntz. Our theme music is by Andrew Logan, and our technical advisor is James Skinner. Thanks again to Elizabeth Deanna Morris Lakes for joining us on the show. Just rolls off the tongue. If you enjoyed today's episode, whisper about it to your lover in bed tonight.
We know Rachel will be. But better yet, leave us a review.
Such as...
It's better than fracturing your ankle by stepping in a hole.
All right.
That is some.
That's at least
that's
true.
a rave right there, folks.
Which is what I did last week.
Take it from our guest. And don't forget to subscribe.
Subscribe.
And you will never miss an episode.
Happy writing.
Right on.